we'll go through some great tips for you just to get you into kind of thinking about how to take care of them well. Most of them will usually thrive without too much excess care. You just want to make sure you don't give them too much love. And if you do want any, there's some hot apple cider and then cold lemonade if you are feeling warm. So feel free to get up and get a drink there. We got a few minutes. We could let some folks get in here. Hot chocolate. The coffee bar is not open today, unfortunately, but we're working on it. We're trying to teach Abby how to do, you know, the really cool foam they do in the top of coffee now. Like, what do they call that? You make little shapes, little tulips and stuff like that. Right, Abs? You want to learn how to do that for the coffee bar? Yeah. She's all in. So how many people have like a houseplant collection? Anybody have like a huge collection of houseplants? More than 5? More than 10? More than 20? Nice. A couple people. How many people aspire to have that? All right, there we go. I'm gonna bring our outdoors indoors a little bit. You know, I remember as a kid in the 80s here, it was a lot. We had a lot of some more severe freezes through the decade of the 80s. My parents loved plants, so we had a patio with shelves and plants all over the place. But if it got cold, we had to bring them all inside. And so as a kid, you know, we just had a little ranch house, so it wasn't a ton of space. But our living room, I mean, we had to make a path through the plants to get through. We had big rubber trees that were growing in like 25-gallon whiskey barrels. We dragged those into the garage. That's kind of the unfortunate thing with houseplants. If you have them on patios and stuff, you do have to bring them in from the cold. So, what can you do? If they're inside, you're probably okay. Lose any houseplants? Yeah, probably. We're definitely guilty of killing a few plants from time to time. Can't say we're not. What do they, I did it in a newsletter one time, I'm going to forget what the quote was, but you're a novice gardener if you have not killed 100 plants. Right, what is it, you're an expert gardener. You're qualified to tell people how to garden if you have killed 100 plants, and you're qualified to tell people how to kill their plants if you've killed over 1,000. So we feel well qualified here at Kirby's Nursery.
You should have known that when you're growing up.
That's right. So yeah, we're guilty of losing plants as well. I am very guilty of taking plants home to plant, not planting them, and then 2 months later they're rooted into the ground, or they just don't. They're not doing very well. So don't feel like you're alone if you kill plants. But we're going to try to make sure you kill as few as possible and keep your favorite ones alive. All right, yeah.
I just have a question.
Sure.
I have a lucky bamboo, and some of them are getting brown.
Mm-hmm.
I've transplanted. How do I re-nourish that brown? Do I snip it or?
Sure. Well, definitely snip it off. You want some new growth to come out, because once brown, once a leaf turns brown, it's not going to turn green again.
Just the tip though?
Yeah, just the tips off of something like that. And what I'll tell you is this: why don't we go through the workshop, and hopefully that'll give you some tips of what to do. And then if you still have a question specifically, we can certainly answer it afterwards. So I think it's about 2 o'clock. Kim, if you hit record, oh boy, I'm live. So welcome to the Houseplants Workshop. This is the first time we've offered this seminar. We do plan to offer it again sometime in the spring. So if you have other friends who want to be plant parents, let them know that we will do it again. We'll see how the schedule works out for it. For folks in the back rows, can you hear me just fine? All right, this is my first time using the mic in a workshop, so I'm kind of like adjusting to how my voice sounds in my own ears, right? Your voice never sounds like what you think it does. I hear my voice on an answering machine, I'm like, that's a crazy deep voice. And then I realize it's actually me. So our next workshop will be in a few weeks on February the 16th on vegetable gardening. That's one of my favorites. Bumped it up a week earlier this year in the hopes of it being kind of a mild winter. Maybe we can get those gardens going a little bit earlier. So that's on February the 16th. Other events are posted on our website as well. And if you get our email newsletter, we'll certainly let you know about those events as they come up. If you're not on the email newsletter, over by our drink station, Abby can show you where you can sign up for our newsletter, where you get more stories about me than you probably care to read, but hopefully some great plant advice too. So Plants are amazing, aren't they? Everybody here amazed by plants, right? So the interesting thing about plants that we don't think about a lot is that almost every breath that we take, not the Sting song, but or the Police song rather, is at some point has been exhaled by a plant somewhere on this earth, right? And so I kind of asked, why don't we have more plants, whether it's indoors or outdoors? I think we all could use more plants. Better for our earth, better for us. Houseplants specifically can certainly help us generate oxygen in our homes, even if it's not overwhelming amounts. There's been some research done that's shown that they take carbon monoxide and formaldehyde and different chemicals out of the air. And even if those things are just on a minor level, they're gorgeous, right? They're pretty, they bring some nature inside, make us a little happier, maybe a little bit more excited for the day when we see plants. I know nature always kind of makes me feel that way. So they add a little nature to our sort of unnatural indoor spaces. And so if you're ready to start your indoor jungle, your jungalo, or there's an Instagram hashtag, it's called Houseplants Make Me Happy. So if you're ready to post some of the pictures of your houseplants, let's go through how we're going to take care of them, keep them alive in our homes. And then I'm also going to do a repotting demo for you towards the end. And then of course I'll answer your questions as long as you have them after the workshop. So the first thing that I start almost every seminar with is picking the right location for your garden or your plants. There's a saying in gardening, right? Right plant, right place. A plant that loves the sun doesn't want to be in the shade, vice versa. A plant that loves the shade doesn't want to be in the sun. So our location is pretty set here. We're going to put them in our home since we're doing houseplants. But we still want to find the right location within our home to put them in. So all of these plants, everything we're going to talk about here are all low light plants. That does not mean no light plants. Anybody work in a cubicle? If you work in a cubicle farm and you're in the middle of the floor, you're not near a window, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of houseplants to grow in your office. Same goes for your home. If you've got an interior room with no windows and not a lot of sunlight, it's going to be tough. There's just not very many plants that take no light. But there's lots of plants that like low light. So what you want to look for is a bright area in your home, somewhere with a nice sunny window. My rule of thumb is this for light for houseplants. Middle of the day, when it's a nice sunny day, turn the lights off. The room should be bright. Kind of like this right here. Kind of like a nice bright room where there's plenty of sunlight coming in. Most of our houseplants, the signs will say indirect light. And that just means plenty of bright sunlight, but no direct light on them is what most houseplants are going to like. Unfortunately, the lights that we have in our home don't provide the spectrum of light that plants need. Who likes science? Whew, lots of people, excellent. So we all remember the colors of the rainbow, right? You learn it in different ways. I learned Roy G. Biv as kind of the acronym, right, for the colors of the visible spectrum of light. And so plants make their food through a process of photosynthesis. And research has shown that they are most active, they most actively photosynthesize in the red spectrum and in the blue-violet spectrum. So in the middle, they don't do a whole lot. Unfortunately, most of our light bulbs that we have inside are going to be in the orange-yellow range, which means they're just not producing the right light for plants. So we can't rely on the lights in our home to provide any food for those plants, to activate that process of photosynthesis. And there certainly are other light technologies, fluorescence and things like that, that provide a little more of the spectrum. But for the most part, the majority of lights we use just don't provide enough. And the intensity of it is such, especially, I know we're kind of switching off to LED technologies now as opposed to incandescent, but the incandescent bulbs are what? Kind of hot. And to actually get enough light on the plants, you have to have the light bulb so close that you create an extra set of heat damage, which kind of offsets the benefit you get from having the light that close to them. So there certainly are grow lights and things like that for indoor growing. That's a whole different seminar. So for the most part, what we want to do is know that they're not going to get light from the lights in our home. And then we need to make sure that they're near a bright, sunny window. Big sliding glass door is always perfect. And certainly a lot of these plants are great for porches and patios that have plenty of shade. So they're not exclusively house plants. They can be on a porch or patio as well, as long as they're not getting hot, direct sunlight. So on the flip side, houseplants can get way too much sun. Everybody have a window in their house where the sun beats in at a particular time of day. that's probably not going to be a great place for the houseplants. You're going to have the hot sun coming in, and then you've also got, the glass will often sort of amplify that, the heat coming in, and that's not great for the plants either. So that spot's not probably going to be the best one for your houseplants. Near that window is probably good, somewhere in the light area that it's producing, just not right in the direct path of the sunlight. A lot of these plants are native to rainforest, jungle kind of canopies, where they're going to get light that's filtered through the trees for the most part. So not a lot of direct sunlight for them. Did you require some? So you've got on your handouts there, if you've got one of those, a list of the symptoms of plants not getting enough light. Because certainly I feel like you have to try a few locations within your home before you find that perfect spot for all your houseplants. Because the light, it's going to bounce off walls differently, the ceiling differently, and so you may have to experiment a little bit. But as you start to see some of these symptoms, you'll know that the plants aren't probably getting enough light. It might be time to try a new location. So spindly growth where the stems seem like they're getting long. Who's had a plant that looks like it is trying to find the sun, right? That's kind of what they start to look like. When you see that, that may not be enough light. Small new leaves, so if it is growing but the leaves seem stunted, that may be a sign of not enough light. Lower leaves turning yellow and falling off can be another symptom of not enough light. Variegated, right? We have really pretty variegated plants. I saw a really cool post. I can't remember if it was at a garden center somewhere or if it was somebody's home. They called it the Variegation station, and it was just all variegated plants. It was a really cool plant design. But if that variegation starts to become muted and almost turns green, that can be a sign that the plant's not getting enough light. And then if you have some flowering indoor plants, especially the flowering ones, need as much light as you can give them. Flowers need a little more light than just foliage to bloom. And so if flowering plants aren't blooming anymore, that can be a sign that they're not getting enough light as well. So if any of those conditions exist with the houseplants that you're having trouble with, switch their location and see if that doesn't change them a little bit. Unfortunately, if I were to list the symptoms of not enough water or too much water, some of them are going to be similar, things like yellowing leaves. So sometimes it just takes picking something that you're going to try to do differently and see if that works to fix the problem, and then trying a couple of other things until you actually find the solution. Let's see. One last consideration for your location for the plants is make sure they're not in a drafty area. A leaky window with cold air coming in, hot air coming in the summertime, leaky doors, or even near like an air conditioning return. They just don't like a lot of wind blowing past them. So make sure they're in an area that isn't particularly drafty for your houseplants. That's important as well. We already said they're cold sensitive. The majority of these plants are tropical. Temperatures under 40 degrees, they need to be inside. So if they are on a patio or a porch or something like that, make sure on nights like we're about to have through the coming week where we're hitting those upper 30s or near freezing temperatures, bring them on inside. And just one night inside won't hurt you, right? So a lot of you probably read ahead, but what would you say, or what do you think the #1 killer of houseplants is? Don't say it. Yeah, no, I know you already know. But probably if you didn't know, what would you have answered, right? Maybe you said, well, they don't get enough water. Or people just don't pay attention to them. Or maybe it's not enough fertilizer or things like that. But it is water. However, it's water in a different way. So if this was the vegetable workshop or the fruit tree workshop, here's what I would tell you. You have to water every single day for the first month, and then you water every other day for the second month. There's a whole spiel that we have about watering well. Those outdoor plants, so many of our problems are not enough water. But on the flip side, for our house plants, we often find that the plants are being overwatered. Whether it's because you're a new plant parent and you're super excited about your new plants, and you say, I'm going to water these guys every day, I'm going to make sure they're really happy. Or what it is, for some reason, overwatering is one of the biggest causes of death to houseplants. So the first thing you can do is make sure that you follow a good common sense watering schedule for those indoor plants. And you've got some information on your sheet there, and we'll go through some of it now. One of the first things that the staff, like new staff here, have to learn is that too wet looks exactly like too dry on plants, or at least very, very similar. So it's really easy to see your plant, oh, it's wilting, I'm going to soak it with water. And then the next day, well, it's wilting again. I'm going to soak it again. And we have that with new staff here. Inevitably, we have that happen at the nursery. And we have to kind of tell them, oh, wait a minute, you're overwatering that plant. It's already soggy. So the most important thing you can do with those houseplants is check them each time you go to water. Rule of thumb would be that I would say in the summertime, you're probably going to water the houseplants around 2 times a week. That will change if you've got ferns or cactus and succulents, but around twice a week in the summer and possibly only once a week through the winter. Most of our homes right now are pretty mild. The AC may come on a little bit in the afternoon one day, the heater might pop on a little bit at night, but for the most part we're at a pretty comfortable temperature inside. It's pretty dry, so the plants won't need nearly as much water through the winter months when it's a little bit cooler out. So you want to make sure you check them. Just stick your finger up to the first knuckle into the soil, and if it's damp, don't water. You're gonna water, check them again the next day. The way we typically water our houseplants, we're going to soak them so that we soak them all the way through. A little bit of water might come out the bottom of the drainage holes, but we want to get the pot thoroughly soaked, and then, like I said, we're going to leave it until it dries out again, and that would be the next time that you water it. And again, if you see that wilting, check before you water, because that is one of the biggest problems, that you see that wilt and you say, it's wilting, I need to water, and you do that, and then unfortunately you give it too much water. Yeah?
How much, when you're checking it, you finger how far down you go?
Just to like the first knuckle or so. I mean, unfortunately with watering, there's no scientific way to tell you exactly what to do, right? I can't say, well, you've got a Ming Aurelia, so you're gonna give it 3 quarts every 3 days, and that would be the exact way to do it. Unfortunately, there's no science to it. In some ways, as you start with a houseplant, you have some success, and you get a second houseplant, you're gonna learn exactly what each one of those plants need. And eventually, if you have kind of an array of plants, you're going to start to know, hey, this guy needs it a little more than this one over here, and you'll just sort of know that. That's kind of the art part of gardening. That's where you have a green thumb, is when you kind of know the nuances of each one of your plants and how much water they need and when. I can only start you with a nice rule of thumb to get you going, but you're just checking the top part of the soil. Once that top part is started to dry out, it's no longer damp, then it's a good time to water it again. If you feel like you're doing it every day, then you might need to increase the amount of water you're getting into the soil. We'll talk later about some signs of a plant needing to be repotted. If it doesn't seem like it's taking up the water well, it could be time to repot. There might not be enough soil in there to hold the water over those couple of days so that it has a continual source for it. So, all of that just kind of lectured you on make sure you don't overwater your plants. On the flip side, of course, don't underwater them. Don't get a brand new houseplant and go to Mexico for 3 weeks. It's probably not going to be happy when you get back. Houseplants, they're inside, right? So they're not like landscape plants outdoors where we can say, they'll get some rain. We've got to make sure we are giving them the water that they need. So make sure you're not underwatering as well. Follow that schedule of like twice a week. Check them each time, and you may find that you have to do it a little bit more or a little bit less, and you'll kind of learn the way your house works and how much water gets taken up by the plants. One thing that makes everyone's homes a little bit different is that everybody runs their air conditioners and their heaters differently. And what makes air really uncomfortable in Florida? Humidity. What makes it really comfortable inside? No humidity, right? So what do we do? What's one of the purposes of our air conditioners? It cools the air, but it dehumidifies it as well. It'd be miserable inside, right, if it felt as wet indoors as it did outside in the summer. But that's kind of a problem for plants. Where do we say they're mostly native to? Rainforests, jungles, low humidity in those areas? No, really, really high humidity, a lot like Florida, right? And so in those high humidity areas, the plants were used to the air around the leaves having a lot of saturation in them. And so we bring them indoors, and it's a really, really dry condition, and that can actually cause the plant to lose water really fast, as well as water from the soil to evaporate a little more quickly. And that's another reason why in the summer you may water a little bit more to make up for the water that's being pulled out from our air conditioners. As opposed to the winter time where we're not running them nearly as much when the temperatures are just a little more stable and comfortable. So that's just something to keep in mind, that as the seasons change, you may change your watering schedule with the plants as well. See, we'll go back to humidity in a second, but first, make sure you're using the right kind of water. You know, my plants always love, a sparkling Voss water, right? I'm kidding. You don't have to buy them anything expensive. But the two things you want to think about is, do you have a water softener, and are you on chlorinated city water? Or are you on chlorinated city water? Or both, I guess. And in either of those cases, I thought my microphone would be louder than the motorcycles and the cars outside. I guess not. In either of those cases, you might want to do something about your water before you water the plants. So if you have city water and it's chlorinated, my suggestion would be to fill up your watering can the night before. Let it sit. The chlorine will typically dissipate and you'll be ready to water the next morning. If you're on softened water, either filter it, or a lot of water softeners have a bypass so that you could bypass it and then get the water that's unsoftened and then undo the bypass. That may be a little complicated. I know at my home, we're on a well, but we have a softener, and so like our outdoor water does not go through the softener. It's the well water outside, but inside it's softened water, and that wouldn't be good water for the plants. Occasionally it's fine, but if you always use softened water, there's a lot of salt in it. That's the whole process of getting rid of the hard minerals. So it leaves some salt behind, and as that builds up in the soil, it's not good for the plants. You might see it as like tip burn on the leaves or different things like that. You could always use something like distilled water. If you really love your plants, buy them something like that. But you could also, get a rain barrel. Where does the best water for any plant come from? From the sky. I don't think anyone's figured out what it is about rainwater. But even here in the nursery, we don't do it anymore because we have so many plants. But when they were in the store, we used to, if it started to rain, we'd kind of move all the houseplants outside, let them get a little soaking from Mother Nature, and then bring them back in. And it's surprising, but that makes a huge difference. Even on your landscape plants outside, you water with the hose, and everything seems like it's doing okay. And then Mother Nature waters it, and all of a sudden it all flushes out. So who knows what's in the rainwater? But if you have a rain barrel or something like that, it's a wonderful way to collect water for your houseplants. Oh, what did my dad used to do? And actually, great-grandma Kirby used to do it too. You know where your air conditioner drips? Put a bottle under there that's pretty much distilled because it's condensed water from the air. So it's really clean water as well. So if you're into recycle, reduce, reuse, that's a great way to get some clean water as well. But do make sure, so the big ones are the chlorine or the salt from the water softener. Try not to overuse those on the plants because both chemicals will build up in the soil and can cause them issues over time. So now we got to talk about humidity a little bit, because these plants do like a humid condition. It helps them out. Another reason for like tip burn on the very tips of the leaves, you were asking about that on Lucky Bamboo, and is it in water or in soil? It is, okay, it's in soil. So this could be the problem then. They love humidity, a lot of the house plants. And so that tip burn shows up because the leaves are actually burning, they're just getting a little bit too dry. So there's two things you can do to help with humidity on your house plants. One of them, if I can reach it here, I brought too many cool plants up. Oopsie. If you break it, you bought it. Good thing I already bought it. So we took a little tray, a little saucer here, and we filled it with gravel. Now we're not trying to create a watering tray. You can water by sitting plants down into like a tray of water. That can be a way to water when you're going away for a little while, at least kind of a stopgap if you need to. What we're going to do here, what we would do is fill this with water just so that it was below the level of the gravel, and then sit the plants up on top. So they were not touching the water, but so that there was water beneath them. As the water evaporates, with the dehumidified air pulling the water up, it's going to create some humidity in and around those plants, and that can help increase it. And you can make it, this is kind of pretty gravel in there, you can make it kind of decorative as well for your plants if they were struggling with that kind of an issue. And then the other way is just a hand spray bottle. Anybody do orchids where you keep a sprayer and you spritz the roots or something like that? You can do that with your house plants as well. Now be careful about getting water on the leaves. That can cause fungus issues, especially things like African violets, which can be a little finicky. So you don't want to oversaturate the leaves, but just a little spritz of water around them can increase that humidity and help them out if they seem like they're struggling, because we are bringing them into a slightly unnatural environment, right, by pulling them into our homes. Okay, so now we have watered our plants. We have made sure they've got some humidity. Now we want to feed them as well. The great thing is this is super easy to do for houseplants. There's no like crazy science to it. Our favorite fertilizer is this, the 14-14-14 with Osmocote. Osmocote is a coating on the fertilizer that makes it slow release. You have to do that like once every 4 months. So 3 times a year, say a plant, you know, this kind of 6-inch pot size, it would get like a tablespoon, and you just do that a couple times a year. Delivers everything that the most houseplants need. For most of our houseplants, we're not that worried about them producing flowers. We're certainly not worried about fruits. So there's not as much concern about minor elements and all that kind of stuff that we might talk about when we're doing fruit trees or other stuff for outside. So that is just the easiest way to fertilize. You can do liquid fertilizers. We've got like Fox Farms Grow Big here, which is a nice natural fertilizer. You can usually use the blue water, something like Miracle Grow as well. Those you would do more regularly. Liquid fertilizers don't last very long, so those you would do more like once a week to keep the plants happy. What I would say is use something like the Osmocote, and then if for some reason you see like, hey, I really want this plant to grow a little more, I want it to be a little bit greener, then you can do a couple rounds of liquid fertilizer or something like that. But you don't have to worry too much about feeding the houseplants. Fortunately, because a lot of them are just foliage, it's pretty easy to keep them happy from a feeding standpoint. So not too much to worry about there. How many of you love cleaning your house? Nobody? I don't know, my wife is KonMari-ing the heck out of our dresser drawers right now, so she does seem to get a good kick out of it. That should be this week's newsletter. I hope she can't hear me. Although my socks take up very, very little room in the drawer now. It's pretty amazing. Oh, now I've sidetracked myself. Cleaning. But every week, right, your dressers, nightstands, there's a new layer of dust on them, right? And you dusted it this week, and then there it is again the next week. Well, where else do you think that dust settles? On the leaves of the plants, right? So outside it wouldn't be a huge deal because the rain would come and wash most of it away. But inside, it's probably not raining. Although when it rains really hard, we've got a leak in a couple places on our roof that I'm not looking forward to replacing. But it's not going to rain inside, right? So we're going to have to do something to keep those plants clean and help them make sure that the plants are getting all the sunlight that they actually need, since they have a little bit less than normal, right? They're indoors, they're having to pick up as much as possible. So for smooth leaf plants, like something like the peace lily, philodendrons, pothos, Chinese evergreen Dracaena, those mildly damp washcloth or sponge, and just wipe them clean every now and then. Not every week. Doesn't have to be an overwhelming chore, but even if it's a couple of times a year, just give them a nice wipe down so that all that dust that's collecting on other surfaces can be cleaned off of the leaves. They can get the sunlight that they actually need. Yeah, for the smooth leaf plants, just a damp sponge or a damp rag or something is fine. Not overly wet, we're not trying to soak the leaves, but just something damp. So that's for the smooth leaves. I don't know if I have any fuzzy leaf. Well, this succulent here is kind of fuzzy leaf. So this one's fuzzy leaf if you're doing things like African violets, or some of the little houseplants will have almost little hairs on the leaves. For those, you don't want to wipe them because you'll damage the hairs or the texture that's on the leaf. For those, like a little paintbrush or makeup brush or something with kind of soft, fine bristles, and you can just brush the plant off to get the dust off of those. For something, this is a Mingoralia here, but other kinds of ferns, if you're doing ferns inside. For those, just a light spray of water, shake it off in the sink, just kind of give them a little bath, and then allow them to dry off. I saw a funny Instagram post. A lady is doing ferns in her shower. And so like attached to like the glass are all these ferns growing in her shower. Wherever you want to get them, I guess, right? If you got a skylight, go for it. And then for cactus or succulents, you know the little air cans that you use for cleaning electronics, the dust out of them? You could use those for something like a cactus if you needed to get the dust off of it. This isn't specifically a cleaning, but if you've got a big party coming up and you want your houseplants to look like superstars, Leaf Shine is a little spray that really shines up the leaves. We've done it with a couple of them here, like this peace lily, and you can just see that the leaves really kind of shine and sparkle. So you don't want to do that all the time, but that's a way you can make them look like just really stand out. If you're entertaining or you want to show them off in some way, do not ever use Leaf Shine on like plants in the sun. It will burn them. It's kind of an oil-based spray. I don't know the answer to that. It's kind of like an oil. So, I mean, there's a trick. I figured this question would come up at some point of like what houseplants are okay for animals. and I cannot answer that question. Every animal is different, and you know, you got to check with your vet for like the specific toxicity of different things, and it depends on the animal too. So we certainly use it at the nursery, and Willow, you know, if you've seen my werewolves Willow posts online, you know, she does it like it doesn't bother them, but they don't really go after the plants. And I know some cats and some animals can be a little bit different in the way that they attack plants. So it's an oil based, so I feel like if they like rubbed up against it, it would probably be fine. I feel like if they drank it, probably not. But it would just be a little spray on most of the plants. So that might be something to check with a vet or something about. All right, so that's cleaning. Don't have to overdo it, but we do want to keep that dust off of our house plants. Two more steps for taking care of our plants, and then we'll talk about some of the fun ones. Pruning and maintaining the plants. You don't have to do this a lot, and it can be a really easy thing that you do along the way, but especially for plants that can get kind of big, something like a pothos, it's really easy to just every now and then, if you see a big trailer coming out, pinch it off. That's all we call it. It's called pinching off. You see where they're growing at the end of the kind of the longer piece there? We call that the growth tip. And then wherever a leaf attaches to a stem, we call that a node. And so when you go to do a pruning cut, whether it's pinching with your fingernails or a set of sharp scissors or clippers, you would just pinch just above one of the next nodes down. And as you pinch that little growth tip off, on most plants, that will encourage branching to occur further back on the plant. And so if you let them go for a long time and they just get long and spindly, it can take a pretty severe pinch back or prune back to get them back into nice shape. If you just pinch them along the way and encourage that branching and bushiness as you go, then they'll kind of maintain the shape that you want along the way. So it doesn't have to be a weekly thing, just once a month. A little bit of maintenance on some of those plants will keep them looking good. Something like this guy, like a Ming Aurelia, as he grows and grows and grows, if we lose foliage down low, it's tough to bring it back. But if we're pinching off where they are kind of growing at the tips, it keeps encouraging that energy to come out a little bit lower in the plant. So it'll maintain that bushiness along the way rather than having to go and try to recover. For minor pinching back of plants, you can do that any time of the year. If you are going to prune a little bit more severely, if the plant just seems like it's gotten way out of control and needs to really come back, maybe it's a trailing plant that's grown like 3 feet down and you just need to bring it up, you want to do that when the plants are actively growing. They're not going to do a lot of growing in the winter months when it's a little bit cooler. That would be more in like the spring or summer through the warmer months. So spring is always my favorite time to prune things outdoors, and indoors isn't an exception. Like our temperatures start to warm, the days are longer, even inside they're going to get more sunlight, and that's going to encourage them to grow a little bit. So that's going to be the best time of year for doing, especially a severe prune or cutback if you're doing that on your plants. We'll talk about repotting after we talk about the cool plants. And the spring's a great time for that, for repotting as well, just because the plants are going to start actively growing as the daylight hours lengthen. Okay, so that's pruning. We said that. Oh, don't tug on your plants, right? So like pinch cleanly or cut cleanly with scissors or clippers. Don't get in there and start to pinch and then start yanking the leaves out of there. That's not good for the plant. You'll disturb the roots and things like that. So we want to be as nice to our plants as possible. And always make sure that when you're doing that pruning and cleaning kind of maintenance that you do clean up. Any old dead leaves, get those out of there. They can encourage disease and insects to come in. And so just make sure you're always doing a little basic cleanup of the old dead leaves. Anything that's yellowing or starting to die off, make sure you just clip it, snip it, and get it out of there. So the last thing is disease and insect treatment. Fortunately, we don't have to do a whole lot of that with our plants. With our indoor plants. They're inside, they're kind of in a more protected environment. We all like to think there aren't bugs inside, right? But every now and then they'll find their way to those plants, and especially if they are in a patio or a semi-outdoor situation, you'll certainly see more bugs and things like that in those kind of plants. Fungus can be an issue as well, especially if overwatering has been an issue. So soggy plants in a soggy condition can lead to fungus and disease issues. So that's why we try to avoid that. Letting them dry out helps to reduce the incidence of those kind of problems. But if you do see an issue on your plants, our go-to for house plants is going to be neem oil. We use it in our veggie gardens, herbs, and things like that. We have it in concentrate form. We have it as a ready-to-use spray. But it's an easy way to treat a wide variety of pest issues in a nice, safe way. So neem's it's derived from the neem tree. It's natural. And so it's just, if you're doing something inside, you don't want to spray like really toxic chemicals, right? And so it's a little bit safer in that regard. I guess my one recommendation would be if you have like a really bad bug infestation, it's probably time for that plant to go outside into quarantine. Get it rehabilitated before you bring it back inside. Then you could spray it with something a little stronger if you had to. Sometimes people ask about fungus gnats, and the little gnats that kind of can come in the soil or that will lay their larvae in the soil. Neem is a great way for treating those as well if they become a problem. Once they've laid their little eggs into one pot, they're going to find their way to another pot. So if you have that kind of a problem, treat all of your pots with a little drench of neem, and that'll help get rid of the fungus gnats. We've been harvesting a lot from our vegetable garden lately, and we compost. We just got bugs everywhere in the kitchen. We can't do anything about it, so we'll have to just stop harvesting, I guess. All right, so those are the basic steps for taking care of your houseplants. Watering being always one of the most important things with plants, and in this case we want to think about not overwatering our plants. We want to make sure they get some food. We're going to pay attention a little bit to the humidity, just to make sure that they're not struggling with our indoor environment. We're going to prune them and maintain them a little bit so they don't get wild and out of control or spindly and leggy on us. And we're going to watch for disease and insects. So that's all the basics of taking care of your houseplants. So now I'll show you some cool ones. And this is, everybody's got a different opinion on houseplants. Just, you know, if you are on social media like Instagram, there's just crazy amounts of pictures out there of houseplants, and everybody's got what they think is the best one. So we picked 10 that we liked, and I'm going to show you some of those here. We'll start with ones that are mostly smaller plants, great for a tabletop, a shelf or something like that. You can always take a plant shelfie. You get it? You get it? I'm telling you, there's some crazy hashtags out there. I didn't make it up. So this is a Chinese evergreen. This one, or aglaonema, you'll hear it called as well. This one's really pretty. I can't remember if it's called snowburst or snowstorm or something like that, but real pretty bright white. You don't get a ton of flowers in indoor locations, so foliage is often the way we go in order to bring a little bit of extra color. A lot of houseplants are kind of green, but with something like the aglaonema, you can get some color. They did not bring me pinks and reds this week, so we were supposed to get some other really pretty ones that are pink and red on the leaves, all sorts of different modelings and patterns. So that's a really pretty plant. And all of these on this list are relatively easy care. No, I don't think African violets are on there, right? Yeah, we didn't put any of the tough ones. I brought a few over, but we didn't put those on the list. Hoyas are really fun. Hoya doing today, right? So here's a cute little one. Cute little variegation. This one's got a little pink that comes out as well. So how many of you like orchids as well? This is not an orchid class, so we're not talking about orchids inside. But orchids are gorgeous, right? It's like the best addiction you could ever have is like orchids, because there's just, you're always going to find a new orchid. Hoyas are actually kind of the same way. I don't have any in flower to show you, but they have really, really cute clusters of flowers in a couple of different colors, mostly in like the pink, kind of white to lavender sort of family. Real cute little clusters of flowers, really nice fragrance on them, and kind of like orchids, they don't do it all that often. So it's really unique. You can collect some of the Hoyas. Did I bring one of the heart-shaped ones over? I didn't. There's a cool one that has sort of heart-shaped leaves on it, but it looks, I mean, it's just kind of green. It doesn't look all that fun, but when they flower, then it's kind of interesting. So you could become a Hoya collector if you start looking at all the different flowers that they have. Hoyas are a nice one for trailing. So they're great in a hanging basket, or if you want something kind of cascading off a bookshelf, they can be a neat way to get that kind of effect from the Hoyas. Peace lilies are kind of a classic one. Lots of different sizes to peace lilies. This is kind of your standard one with real pretty white flowers. They're usually very easy care. I can't remember, I think we have a few over there. There's a variety called Sensation Peace Lily that has giant leaves that look like a banana tree. So if you have a corner where you need some big foliage, the Sensation Peace Lily can be a great way to add a big burst of greenery to an area. There's a couple of Cactus and Succulents over here. I'm sure you all know what those are, and this isn't a class about Cactus and Succulents, but often they'll do well inside, primarily because it's dry. We have our Cactus and Succulent section is behind the folks over there in the corner, and people always ask, well, they're not in the sun, why aren't they outside? and you cannot keep cactus outside in Florida. It's really tough in the rainy season. So we keep them in the greenhouse, but in a really bright room. If you need something that you really don't have to water that often and is really hard to kill, try a cactus or succulent of one sort or another. That's not to say you can't kill them. It's just harder to. Now, if you really need a plant that you can't kill, the Pothos family. So this one here is a marble queen pothos. That one looks like it, but it's actually a type of philodendron, but it's really easy to. There's the typical, it's a houseplant that's been around for a long time, the golden pothos, same shaped leaves, but it's just the green and gold. And there's a couple of other varieties. I want to say there's one called satin that has a real pretty silvery sheen to it. Pothos, I mean, I'm not sure I can help you if you kill pothos. They're super, super easy. When I was in graduate school, I had one hanging. It was hanging in my house behind a sliding door in my apartment in Atlanta. And I came home for the winter break like 3 weeks. And I went back. Nobody was there. Nobody watered it. And it was shriveled up a little bit, but I pruned it a little, put some water on it, and no problem. So the pothos are really, really easy. If you've struggled with different kinds of plants before, the pothos, and one more why don't we skip over, we'll talk the snake plants. Pothos and snake plants are probably two of the just tough as nails, tough to kill houseplants. The snake plants, also called mother-in-law's tongue, come in a variety of different kind of variegations, kind of a golden green one here and a solid green. There's some really cool ones that we'll hopefully get in later in the season, one called cylindrica, which has just real upright cylinder-shaped leaves, I guess. But the snake plant's very, very tough to kill. Plant it outside in a shady area, in about 5 years you won't be able to get rid of it from that area. So definitely a very tough plant. Tillandsias are kind of fun, and I didn't talk specifically about Tillandsia Care today because they're a little bit different, but they're all sorts of different plants that look a lot like this. Various colors, styles, and shapes to them, sizes as well, but they're air plants, so they don't really have a root system, as you may or may not be able to see that. So no real roots to them. They absorb water through the air, through their kind of they do have a hairy sort of foliage there, and that's where they absorb their water through. But our Tillandsias are on one of the back tables over there at the back of the houseplant section. Lots of cool shapes and colors from those. They bloom. They're in the bromeliad family, so they all put out a really cool little bloom of some sort or another, which can be really unique to see when they actually do bloom for you. So those are also really easy. ZZ plant, so if you have a dark room, the ZZ plant, lowest light plant of any out there. Another really tough as nails one. I've seen multiple instances where a ZZ plant has been left for weeks and weeks at a time with no care that was able to be sort of reconstituted. But the lowest light plant of anything out there. So if you've got a dark space, try a ZZ plant. That one should hopefully work for you in those kind of spaces. Is there any cool ones over here? Oh, this might be one here. This one's a type of philodendron here. All sorts of different leaf shapes to philodendrons. A lot of people are probably familiar with the kind of landscape philodendron, the elephant ear with the big kind of serrated leaves. This is a little philodendron that has kind of a golden green color to it. And there's a couple of other cool varieties over there. There's one that has like little Swiss cheese leaves to it. And then I think I showed you guys this one earlier, the pink princess philodendron. Apparently like a rarity in the interwebs. But it's kind of cool. Most of the leaves come out red, some are green, and then every now and then it throws like a little stripe of pink in it. So it's kind of like a surprise when you get a leaf with some pink in it. So if you want to be surprised by your plants, try one of those there. And someone mentioned earlier that one of their favorites were spider plants. Always a classic, real easy to grow. Got some little guys here. I don't know if we have any hanging baskets now, but they do make a really cute hanging basket because they throw out the little babies that grow on the end. So kind of a unique plant. For that. So those were 10 of our favorites. Let me see if I brought any others over that weren't on that list. They were just kind of cool ones that we got in. I really like the little trailing plants. I think they're kind of cool. This is a kind of peperomia called Pixie, or trailing pepper. I thought I called it Peperomia Pixie. That is trailing peperomia. The cute little leaves and it'll trail over. Again, it could trail on a bookshelf or something like that. What was another one? Oh, baby's tears. Real dainty little leaves to it, but it'll trail over. Another really cute one. This one here is a jade plant. And I actually, It almost looks like Hobbit jade the way it's curling over, but it's one of the jade plants. It's more of a cactus type plant, so another real easy one to do for a kind of a bright, definitely for cactus and succulents, you'd want a brighter area in your indoor space. So then we did bring over, I really thought I could fight the motorcycles with my microphone, I guess not. So if you have a taller space, a corner that needs some height to it, and you want some greenery, I brought a couple of those over that are our favorites. Ficus trees do really well. It's got to be a nice bright space. Ficus do need plenty of water. So my big lecture on overwatering involved a lot of these plants here. Ficus do like plenty of water. So if you have a ficus and it's always turning yellow and dropping leaves, try to just slowly increase the water a little bit on it and see if that doesn't make a difference for it. Really popular right now, the fiddly figs. Those will give you a lot of great height. It's also in the ficus family, but nice big green foliage, which is really pretty. The rubber trees are really nice. That's the burgundy color one on the ground there. They come in a few different colors as well. One's a real pretty variegated kind of color. Hopefully we'll have that one in for the springtime. But those will grow inside and give you a lot of really nice height. And then there's a couple of palms. One we brought over here is a bamboo palm. It will not spread like bamboo, but the kind of canes almost that come up look like bamboo as it grows up. But it'll grow real nice and upright and fill a nice space with some height if you need that for indoors. So those are a couple of the taller ones there. Yeah. And remember, they all need some light, so you just want to make sure that they're by a nice bright window. I mean, that's going to be the key for any of these. That just make sure that it's in one of the brighter spaces of your home in order to get them there. So sometimes you got to let the plants kind of dictate where they go, rather than you saying, I have to have it in this corner over here. Because if it is the darker corner of the room, they may not do as well. Now, that I didn't really put this into my talk, and I didn't know if anyone would ask. But one of the things you can do with some of the taller plants, the shorter ones don't always need it, but rotate them every now and then as well, depending on what direction the sun is coming from. And that can keep the growth nice and even all the way around, so that way you don't get big growth on one side where the sun is and no growth on the other side where it's shady. And then I thought about, we definitely had people ask over time, well, what if it's a really dark room, but what if I take it out once a week so it can get some sunlight and then bring it back in? I'm sure that something like that could work, but my mind just said, would you really do it at some point? It just doesn't seem as practical. But if a plant was struggling from low light, you might move it to an outdoor location to get a little bit more light, to see if that doesn't give it a little more life, and let it come back just a little bit. Yeah. Oh, it just turned variegated. Sure. Possibly so. I mean, variegation is a really interesting thing, and that most variegation is not a deformity, what's the right word? Mutation that you find in plants. I mean, growers are always kind of looking for, we're actually cultivating some variegated pentas because we found like a leaf that burst out that was variegated. And we cut that off and we're seeing if it kind of is replicable. Will the genetics kind of stick? So variegation is always funny like that. So it could have been from a mother plant that had some variegation in it and it just spurred it on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, it's always possible. If the light conditions kind of trigger that variegation to come back, then the low light might cause it to revert to the green. Because you certainly see that with variegation, that it like lessens in dark areas. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure I could give you a full explanation for that. The mysteries of the plant world, right? All right. So now I'm going to repot a plant just to kind of show you how to do it. I know you guys have been sitting here a while, so if you don't want to see me do that, that is absolutely fine. I'm not going to be offended if you want to go check out some plants on this beautiful day. Our cactus succulents are behind us. Houseplants are in the front corner on that side over there with the air plants in that vicinity. Ferns are over there, bonsai, all that kind of cool stuff. So those are over there. So like I said, if you want to get up, that's absolutely fine. Otherwise, I'm just going to go through repotting houseplants real quickly. How many people are scared of repotting their plants? Oh. We can tell you when. So oftentimes when it comes to pruning, when it comes to repotting, we always find people are kind of scared. Like they're afraid they're going to break the plants. And I promise you that plants, all they want to do is live. And so, you don't want to be rough with them. But you can do it. I promise you, it's not as hard as you think. So as far as timing for repotting plants, I love the spring for doing it. That's a time when most plants generally are thinking about growing. It's still cool enough that, now we're talking about indoor plants, so the temperatures outside may not be as important. But even the length of day is kind of growing each day, and that triggers growth on the plants. When you repot it, you'd love for it to grow a little bit. You want it to grow some new roots into the soil, you want it to grow some new leaves and all that kind of stuff. So to me, that kind of spring time frame is probably the ideal time. For houseplants, you really could do it any time of the year. It wouldn't, if you had to do it in November, it's not going to harm the plant at all. But the spring to me is one of those ideal times for doing it, just because of the length of the days there. So there's a couple of signs that the plants might need to be repotted. One of those is just if it looks like it's getting visually too big for the pot, right? The foliage is kind of outgrowing the size of the pot there. At some point, if there's an imbalance between the foliage and the roots, that can cause the plant problems. The roots just can't take up enough water and nutrient to feed all of the leaves. If the plant just seems like it's struggling, you're doing all this stuff, hey, Joey told me to do this, this, and this, I've done all of those things, and I'm not getting any kind of result, that might be a sign that it needs to be repotted. At some point, if the roots fill up the pot, they'll kind of push the dirt out of the way. The dirt's there to kind of help hold some moisture up for the roots so they can get it. It also holds the nutrients that they take up. And once that dirt is sort of pushed out by the root mass in the pot, the plant can just have trouble getting that water up. So that can be a sign if it's just struggling generally. If you feel like you're watering it, it just never feels like it's perking up at all. If it's dry and you're watering it and it always seems dry and it's never perking back up, that can be a sign that it needs to be repotted. And like I said, if you've tried fixing all of these, you've moved it around in some different spots, maybe it's time to repot. So repotting doesn't need to mean that you're moving it into a larger pot. Indoors, we may just